So why is our childhood shown by Ketu, the South Node? In fact, what is our childhood at all? That's what I'm going to talk about in today's video. Have you ever thought about what your childhood actually is? I mean, think about it. And when I mean childhood, I mean the circumstances that you're born into in this lifetime. You didn't choose that. You were thrust into the circumstances of your birth. The family unit, the way they acted, what you picked up in that environment. Think about it. Everything else in your life, everything since then, and in fact, at a certain age, you started to develop individually in response to the environment that you were born into. Well, that childhood is really the culmination of your past lives, your past lifetimes, especially the most immediate response to what what you have just gone through and what you need to experience at the beginning of this lifetime so that your soul can grow. And this is shown by Ketu. It's often said that Ketu refers to past lives, things like that. It's certainly not inaccurate. I think it's kind of lazy astrology to make a big deal about that part of it. And I think a lot of people make a big deal about that part of it because that's something that's sort of novel to them. Oh, past lives. Tell me about my past lives. It's really not that interesting. We've all had past lives, and you're here in this lifetime to focus and concentrate on the soul's lessons now. The knot closes behind your past lifetimes so that you can manage what you need to work on in this lifetime, right? If we constantly remembered everything that happened in our past lives, we wouldn't have enough bandwidth to concentrate on this lifetime. However, what we do get is that condensed experience called our childhood. And this can be seen and analyzed by Ketu probably more than anything else, at least in the sense of what our soul came into this lifetime with, the experiences that we were sort of destined to have to experience early in life and not get to choose. You want to understand, this is one of the biggest things about your childhood is you didn't choose it. It was chosen for you. Now again, you also want to understand there's a lot of New Age concepts these days about, well, your soul chose this, your soul chose this, and we say these things somewhat, sort of in a cavalier way. But you want to understand that as a matter of fact, unless you remember choosing it, it's better to not sort of delude yourself that you chose it, okay? Yes, and on a deeper level, you could say that your soul chose it. It's not entirely incorrect, but there's a lot of kind of New Age bypassing in that type of thinking. When I hear people say that, it's usually in response to something they completely, don't understand, and they're suffering with something, and they have no insight into it, and they'll just kind of sort of cheerlead themselves or cheerlead others by saying, well, don't forget your soul chose it. No reason to get into all of that. There's no reason to get into that. When you understand the nature of karma and lifetimes and things like Ketu and the things I'm talking about here, you'll realize that there's nothing unempowering about the idea that karma works this way. And in fact, the grahas, or the planets, of which Ketu is one of the grahas, is they grab us and they pull us into a body and into the world and into a new birth. And the planets are always grabbing us through our karmas, through our experiences, through our tendencies to see things a certain way. And so Ketu is that graha that grabs us into experience and puts us in a situation with a family and tendencies to see things a certain way. And that winds up giving us a lot of, or it winds up teaching us these deeper skills and deeper, patterns that we've spent a lot of time working on in our recent past lives. And in fact, a lot of the time, these are things that we don't need to spend a lot of time on in this lifetime. We come into a situation in our childhood and we reconnect with that past life. It like finishes, it's like the culmination of our past life is our childhood in this lifetime, and we feel like we're finished with it. This is one of the other important qualities of Ketu, is where it feels like we're finished with something. Like, oh, I don't need to go back and do that. I've already been there and done that. Just in general in our life, where Ketu is, we tend to feel kind of used up, like I've already been there and done that, particularly in a difficult way. Again, think about those difficult qualities of your childhood that are still kind of buried, that you don't really understand, but something about it, you're like, oh, I don't need to go there again. I've been there and done that. I know what that's all about. Again, there's a blindness to that. There's a kind of fanaticism about that. Because yes, we have been there and done that. And we did learn a lot. But it's not perfect. We still have things to learn where Ketu is. But our childhood taught us something. We had to learn an amazing skill in order to cope with what we went through. And we learned a lot about that area of life. And in fact, but we didn't really enjoy it because it was something that was kind of forced on us. Now again, opposite Ketu is Rahu, where our soul hasn't really done that thing so much. So where Rahu is rebelling against the Ketu end. So the Rahu-Ketu axis is where we are rebelling against our childhood, which is the Rahu part. But the Ketu part is that landed experience that we came into life with, and that we learned, those things that we learned based on those circumstances that we just happened to find ourselves in, that we didn't choose. In fact, Rahu, in many ways, is the things we choose. Now, all the planets are things we choose. I'm speaking in generalities here, but also very focused because, again, Ketu is that part of the childhood. There are other indicators that also refer a lot to our childhood. For example, the moon also refers to the childhood because it's our memories, it's that innocent mind that has been unspoiled. It's the part of your mind that still remembers back into your childhood, and all of those experiences that you had somehow still feels like it was you, right? That part of your mind that even though you've been through so many changes, it still feels like it was you who experienced all of that stuff decades ago. The moon is that sort of continuity, not just from this lifetime, but through all of your past lives as well, because that's what the moon is. It's the manas, it's the consciousness that goes with us from lifetime to lifetime and keeps that aggregate of feeling in our mind. And also the second house, and the second house ruler also has a lot to do with the childhood and our values, those values into which we were raised, and then that evolving value system that we're always learning. But Ketu is especially important in analyzing the childhood so that we can notice what is the buried, hidden, uncomfortable, confusing part of our childhood, which also still leaves us somewhat filled with rage. A lot of those buttons that get pushed, a lot of those things that we feel like we've already worked through that. Oh, I've worked through that. We all think we've worked through everything. We work through things in stops and starts. And that part of us that we pulled a few things out of our childhood and they still kind of fill us with rage. And as soon as that button gets pushed, it can be like, don't do that. This refers to Ketu, where we did learn these these lessons, but they came at a high price. And in fact, it was uncomfortable lessons, so much so that we don't feel like we really want to go back and re-experience that thing again. But it still hangs out in our mind and consciousness as a real blind spot, as something that we feel like we've gotten over it, but we're really still stuck in it on a very deep level. So unraveling that Ketu knot is one of the most important things in unlocking the hidden anger and rage and frustration of our childhood. And again, this keeps us stuck because it's also where there's an enormous amount of genius and intelligence. But like I said, it's often buried and covered beneath a lot of intensity and things we don't enjoy because it was forced on us. So for example, if someone has Ketu in their 10th house, right, then Rahu would be in their 4th house. Okay, well, Ketu in the 10th house shows that in their recent past lives, and also let's say in their childhood, they had a lot of responsibility. Had a lot of responsibility thrust on them. Maybe, you know, what I've seen many times when Ketu is in the 10th house, they had to take care of maybe one of their parents or their brothers, or maybe they had like an alcoholic parent or a parent who was really young and immature. So the person with Ketu in the 10th had to kind of be an adult, had to be a kind of grown-up, kind of be responsible. So now they handle responsibility well, and they understand how all of that works, but it was kind of forced on them in their childhood. So in this lifetime, they feel like, I don't have to put a lot of attention on that. I already know what that's about. But what I didn't get to do, which is Rahu in the 4th house, is just follow my heart, be kind of emotional and irrational and whatever. I didn't get to do that. So the Rahu in the 4th house would always be looking to just indulge their feelings and emotions wherever they took them, because they didn't get to do that when they were a child. So for example, and so this is the way the Rahu-Ketu axis works. Rahu was cheated, and it's where we feel a little bit cheated. And Ketu is where we were burdened with something. So Ketu is like that sort of disapproving parent within, or that responsibility or that burden that was thrust on us. And Rahu is that area of life where, in response to that, we feel kind of cheated that we never got to do that thing, so we wind up doing that a lot. Because again, this is where the soul is really trying to conquer new territory in this lifetime, is where Rahu is. Again, so to just circle back, where Ketu is, it's like the culmination or the completion of our past lifetime, and where the soul really gained a lot of progress, where we don't really need to put as much time into learning that in this lifetime. So our childhood, we get that thing kind of reaffirmed in us in a very deep way. Because what we're really here to do is to try to develop a lot of those things with Rahu, because that's where the soul was more immature. So again, any planets that Ketu also joins, he's going to influence, you'll see that kind of thing in the childhood as well, where that'll be a big theme in their childhood, wherever Ketu, of course, the sign that he's in is going to show the psychology of how they responded to that lesson. The house of Ketu shows the general sort of field of experience, like I just explained, like with Ketu in the 10th house, responsibility and pressure. Let's say that 10th house was Virgo, okay? Then they will handle it in a kind of Virgo way, because that's what the signs are. But then if Ketu is joined, let's say it's joined Jupiter, and Jupiter is the 5th house ruler, let's say it's for Leo and it's the 5th and 8th house ruler, then Ketu will also bring that as part of it, right? There might be death they had to deal with, and creativity as well, or whatever it is. So whatever planets join Ketu, their nature and the houses they rule are also going to be big themes in the childhood. And again, all of these things are subtleties that that you have to unravel when you're looking in the natal chart. But in general, you want to understand that some of the most deep, buried and hidden parts of our mind and psyche come from Ketu, and it shows up in the childhood, in our childhood. Because again, the childhood is that thing that just was thrust upon us. And it's an aggregate of all of our past lives and all of the wisdom that we'd gathered, condensed in a really visceral form. So that we'll experience that, and it winds up being this skill and this mastery, like I said, like the person who had to take care of their, immature parent. Well, they learned how to do that, so they have a lot of skill in being responsible. But when they have to be responsible, it comes with this kind of feeling of pressure and burden because it brings up these childhood memories, right? So where Ketu is, it's that sort of feeling. It's that part of the childhood. So again, and the moon is also related to childhood because the moon is that through line that remembers all the way back to those early childhood memories. The moon is that innocent mind that's not spoiled by anything, right? That always feels like you've been the one living your life. Even though your body has changed and your life has changed, your mind still feels like you somehow, right? Still feels like the same mind because that's the moon. And also the second house, which is our values. Very important thing about our childhood is we're born into a certain value system. Values of the family. And we don't have any choice but to listen to the values that we're raised in. But then we start to want to establish our own values and our own family and our own tribe. So anyway, I hope this was helpful to learn. And I am teaching a class on the childhood and how to understand the childhood in Vedic astrology. And you should check that out. I'll have a link below this video that you can look at. Something that we all need to learn to understand. Of course, if you're doing readings, you want to be able to understand that in other people as well. But learning to really understand your childhood and how it programmed you and how it conditioned you and what it was really about, very important.